It's going to be hard to put into words, but there really is something special about Clear Lake. And I can't help but think that it might have something to do with the geologic and human history here.
It's a place that I call home. I have moved away and back 3 times. This lake calls me home.
My favorite part of the lake, I just love looking at specific areas. So I live in Lucerne, which is known as Shigum, where I'm from. And I love looking at it from my wife's view of her property in Nice. In any place where it's a view of the lake and the water. My favorite spot of all, though, is at the end of Lucerne. There's a rock, and I call it Xabatin, which means big rock by the water, because Xabe means rock and Ha means water. So I just constructed that name out of my language to call it that. So I call that rock that, and I pray by it. And I sit there, and it's interesting because that's the same rock that in high school we stood on and took a baseball picture of in my freshman year. Pretty cool.
Growing up, my grandparents used to take us to the lake all the time. And I have a lot of fond memories because the lake reminds me of my grandparents and, many of our childhood outings. This whole basin flourished with life, and if it had not been for Clear Lake, I am certain our people would not have stayed connected here. It provided fish, it provided resources to make boats, baskets, all kinds of things that were vitally important to day-to-day life.
Clear Lake is very unique. It's not like any other lake. So give you some perspective. Clear Lake is big, we know that. It's 120 miles of shoreline if you count all the coves, the islands, the bays. It's shallow. It's an average of 27 feet in depth, which is very shallow. And it's very, very old. And I mean old. On the timeline, geologic terms old. Let's look at the average lifespan of reservoirs in the United States. They're around 60, 61 years for reservoirs. So that's things like Berryessa, Folsom, Shasta Reservoir. Look at the Great Lakes region. Those are Great Lakes, Lake Superior, Lake Huron, Lake Erie. Those are 20,000 years old. That lake basin was formed, glaciers retreated. Clear Lake is basically a depression in the earth. There's some springs from heavy thermal and volcanic and geothermal activity. There's springs at the bottom that release water. And this depression has filled up with rainwater and stream water for about 2 million years.
California's largest natural freshwater lake, originally referred to as Xabatin, which means big water in native Pomo. It is now known as Clear Lake.
The very first people that arrived in Lake County basically stayed in the Oaks arm of the lake and down in the Clear Lake arm of the lake for a couple of thousand years until the population grew to the point where they needed to establish settlements all around the lakeshore. One of the main food resources and textile resources that they used was tule. Tule is, it's actually like a fabric. The cell structure is like a fabric, and you can weave it, you can shred it and make it into tule mats or tule skirts or tule, shirts. You can weave it and make tule sandals. The tules float on the water, so it didn't take long for somebody to figure out, we can bundle these up and make boats out of them. So tule boats were all around the lake. Their houses were willow frameworks with thatched tule over the framework. The tule thatching is about this thick, which provides about an R9 level of insulation. And when it rains, the rain just dribbles down around the outside, so it stays nice and dry inside. In the summertime, it stays cool inside. In the wintertime, you have a fire pit in the center, and that keeps it warm all winter. So tule huts, tule houses were every village, every family had a tule house. And you can eat tules. When tule shoots first come up fresh, you can grab that shoot and pop it out of the root and peel back the base of the stem and eat it, just like a green onion. It has kind of a sweet, nutty flavor. It's really nice. The bulb, the root itself could also be eaten. Tule is very well adapted to a lake like Clear Lake that has annual, water level changes. The water level will go down during the summer and up during the winter. And the tule bulb anchors in the bottom in the mud along the shoreline. Well, when the water level rises to a certain point, those bulbs will break loose and the tules will float around until they find the new shoreline. During a drought or low water, the water level will go down below the tule bulbs and erode the bank. So after the bank erosion, those tule bulbs will drop down onto the new shoreline. So tules are perfectly adapted to the water level changes every year in Clear Lake.
So the Rumsey scale on Clear Lake was invented by a guy named Rumsey, and he was a captain. And he's from the town called Rumsey, which is downstream near Glinda in the Cape Valley. And this Captain Rumsey identified that Clear Lake water level moved up and down in a different way than many other water bodies, and that the flow was regulated by the Grigsby Riffle. And so he identified a way of measuring the water level on a scale that reflected where the water was at its outflow point at the Grigsby Riffle in Cache Creek. So the gauge is here now at the dock at Vector Control. There was a manual measuring device, but now that USGS has this gauge,
it's collecting data every 15 minutes and is automatically uploaded, and anybody from anywhere around the world can see the lake level data on their computer.
So there's 32 acres of tules out here that get their water only from groundwater coming up. So the tules are fine, but no fish have access to it. So it's really not a functional ecosystem. So we're going to break the levee in 3 places and then reconnect that to the lake. And we're standing on very damaged old farm road, because what happens when Manning overflows, Manning is south of here, and it takes a left turn, and when Manning overflows it just goes straight, and sheet flows across the property to the south, hits our berm and levee and channels down, and it wants to be over there. So in places like this, it goes there. The water goes where it wants to go. So we're going to put swales in this road so that the water will have access out to the tules and then beyond the tules into the lake. So we call it our Restoring the Hydrology Project. And one of the main ways it's going to benefit Clear Lake is by spreading the Manning Creek flow out over close to 50 acres of tules that they no longer flow to. It's going to slow down the water, so sediment, which contains a lot of phosphorus, is going to settle out into the tule bed, and that's going to reduce the incidence of harmful algae blooms, because they depend on the phosphorus that's in the soil. Just because of the nature of the soil in Lake County, the soil's full of phosphorus. So it's going to spread it out, slow it down, sediment it out, and the water that flows into the lake is going to be less nutritious for the green algae.